Hello and welcome to Strange Stories. It's great to have you here. We are all about sharing stories of near-death experiences from around the world in the hopes of bringing some light and inspiration to your day. Our daily videos offer a glimpse into what lies beyond this life, and we believe that they can help us all appreciate the gift of life a little bit more. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to grow. And to our returning viewers, welcome back. We're thrilled to have you with us again. So go ahead, grab a cozy blanket, get comfy, and join us for today's incredible near-death experience story.
I did have a near-death experience. Before my NDE, I'd carried a lot of guilt and shame throughout my life because, I'd messed up a lot of things and I was drinking heavily. I was losing jobs and I felt like a failure. I dropped a friend off at the train station and was assisting her with her luggage as she boarded the train. I kissed her and heard her say goodbye. We were chatting when we heard the emergency buzzers for the doors closing. So I took a step back, but I mistimed it, and my coat became trapped in the doors as they slammed shut. I couldn't get it free, and I looked around for a guard, but no one was there. So I just yelled for help and started banging on the windows, hoping that someone from the rail company would run through and open the doors, but that didn't happen. The engine began to rev up, and I looked into my friend Anna's eyes and saw pure terror, and I knew at that point that this was it. I was going to die. The train began to accelerate, and I was dragged along the platform before being sucked under the wheels. It was like being thrown into a darkened pit and then thrown into a washing machine on full spin, and it was but it was horrifying and violent. The train eventually proceeded, and it seemed to take an eternity, but it did, and it continued down the track. So I was just lying there in complete agony and shock. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The emergency personnel arrived quickly, jumped down onto the track, cut through all of my clothing, and managed to get me onto a stretcher and into an ambulance. The doctor turned around and said, "Look, there's a hospital just around the corner. That's why we got here so quick." Well, I think the one that's going to save you is a bit of a journey. Can you just hang on? Yes, I said. Let's do it. Let's go. So we sped down the highway, and I ended up in the hospital. When I arrived at the emergency department, there was a large circle of guys waiting for me, including surgeons and consultants, nurses and doctors, so there was a lot of frantic activity. I was just lying here, and I could tell they were scared about what was going on, so that was really scary for me. I didn't even know if I was going to survive this because my left arm was losing a lot of blood at this stage. But I seemed to be there for a while, and then my family arrived and the doctor turned around to me and said, "Look, your family are here. Would you like to see them?" I said, "Send them through," and they were obviously upset. My mother was in tears, and I left my body around that time, while they were all standing around. The trauma was just too much, and the pain felt so overwhelming that I didn't know how much more I could take. And then I went from this high tense atmosphere to a really beautiful, calm, and relaxing place. It felt like I was in a darkened room, but I wasn't on the hospital trolley any longer. I looked around and realized I was lying on a massive slate rock, almost like a massive medieval altar, if you will, but it felt comfortable to lie on, despite the fact that I was no longer clothed. I felt comfortable laying on this thing. I looked around and saw these pulsating colors that looked like orbs of light slowly flashing around me, which kept me calm. I figured at that point that I hadn't survived and that I was dead, so that's what I told myself, but I didn't fight it. I didn't reject it, and I didn't try to say no. I'm not ready to go. I looked down to check on my body because I'd seen how ripped it had been from the accident and everything was fixed. It was back in place. There wasn't even a single scratch or bruise, and I was covered in this blue sheet. It had a satin or silk sort of texture to it, and it felt really relaxing and calming to have the sheet over me. And the light that was coming off it was like a white bright light was reflecting onto this sheet, and the light coming from these grits was both intense and beautiful to look at. It felt like it was healing me, like it was a healing light, and then I felt the presence of someone near me just at the end of my feet. There was this beautiful androgynous being, neither male nor female in form, wearing just like a very contemporary black t-shirt, very similar to what you're wearing now. And I found it quite interesting, because I already figured that I'd moved. This being had this expression on their face that made me feel as if I'd known this person my entire life and beyond. But I also felt safe, as if I was being protected by this being. And there was a lot of love, and that was emanating from her or him, and made me feel as if we'd known each other our entire lives and beyond. But I couldn't figure it out, but I didn't really care because I was just in the moment and I didn't really worry about anything anymore. I remember closing my eyes for a while, then sensing that there were more people, so I opened my eyes again, and there were two female forms that had appeared either side of me, and the girl to my right was kind of white Caucasian, sort of, I guess, quite European looking, and the girl to my left was more Asian, Indian American, Indian, wearing like a more traditional dress, I guess, but they both had their hands slowly sort of hovering over my body, The energy that was coming from their hands was just really quite powerful. It felt like an energy of love. This love that was coming was just so powerful. It was just like all the feelings of love that I'd had throughout my life, whether it had been through my mother, my father, my brother, sister, pet cat, or lover, or all those different feelings of love, all kind of condensed into their hands, and it was just great. I didn't feel like they were healing my body. I felt like they were healing my soul, and I felt like they were healing all the hurt, shame, and guilt that I'd been carrying. It was as if all the layers had literally been peeled off of me. I figured I was being prepared for something. I figured this was like I'm going somewhere, and I don't know where, and they're preparing me for it. I did start to think about my family at one point because I knew how upset they were about seeing me lay there, that I'd been under a train. They're in complete shock. My mother was in tears, and so I thought they're going to be really upset now because clearly I'm dead, is what I figured. So I lifted my head and tried to look over to the side of this huge rock that I was laying on, and because I figured I'd probably see them. So it was like looking at something I've never been to. Niagara, but I guess it was that vast. It was like millions of stars just slowly cascading over the edge instead of water, and these stars were just sparkling beautifully, and it was a very awe-inspiring sight. And I thought, wow, look at this. And I looked. There was shooting stars that seemed to be falling through the middle as I looked down. I could see into one galaxy and the other. Initially, I was going for spiritual healing, and I'd found the spiritualist church because I wanted to talk about it after I'd had the near-death experience. I knew nothing about it, and I thought, not arrogantly, but I thought this was the only person it happened to. And so I thought, how am I going to explain this to the world? And so I found a spiritualist church, and of course, when I went there, they said, yeah, you have. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination because it didn't feel as real as I'm sitting here talking to you, but it was a different kind of real. I would call it ultra real. It was just like this incredible place. Things were really sharp and bright. There's a different dimension altogether, Dreams are basically more bizarre and chaotic, and they change with time as well. Whereas with the near-death experience, I call them light beings because they literally were glowing from within. They're on a higher dimension of the universe, if you like. Whereas we're more in the physical sort of lower energies of the universe. So that's how I defined it. So I call them the beings of light because they just, they were on a different level altogether. People who've read the book have found it really easy to read. So, what do you believe the purpose of life is? And why is there so much suffering? It's just part of the texture, Otherwise, life would be completely linear, And also, I know from my own experience that adversity makes you stop and go within and really try and touch base with your soul and be authentic to yourself. And I mean, now is a classic example of that, when the COVID-19 first happened. Everybody went into a state of panic. People like stripping the supermarket shelves of toilet paper. When things go wrong, I just try to encourage people to stop and not be afraid of the future because you never know what it holds. Yeah, okay, so things can happen like this now, and we think, well, my goodness, where is it going? Where is it all going to go? But we don't know. We just don't know. And it's just look around, and think actually where you are in the moment is not that bad. And most people will say, yeah, absolutely, you're right. So, well, I guess what would you say about, or what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned from your ND? Self-love is basically what I learned from it because I'd gotten on before, as I said. I was just suffering from guilt and so a lot of self-dislike and self-disappointment, whereas all that love, that unconditional love as well that I was receiving, that love helped me to stop and give myself an incredible amount of confidence for the first time in my life to say, okay, I'm going to do a painting. Okay, I'm going to write a symphony. Many people ask me, do I fear death? My answer is no. I don't fear death at all because I'm certain that there is an afterlife and that death should not be feared.